I'm the president of the Colon Club. We are a national advocacy group, and we focus on those that have been diagnosed with colorectal cancer when they were under 50. Aside from that, I'm a unicorn. I was 29 when I was first diagnosed. It was stage 4 rectal cancer. It was completely unexpected, and I'm different in that 12 years later, 12 years, I'm standing here before you, and yet I am in active treatment. That makes me a bit of a rarity, and instead of calling myself a rarity, I like to call myself a unicorn. It's fun. I've been tested for Lynch syndrome twice. Lynch syndrome is a genetic mutation that predisposes you to various types of cancer. I tested negative both times, and somewhere in the labs of USC Norris, there's a mouse running around with my genetic tumor growing inside of it, just so that can be studied. I was diagnosed at a very interesting time. There were a lot of changes going on in technology, and there were developments being made. Okay. Oh yeah, sure. So times were changing, social media was on the rise, and what I call kind of old cancer kind of refers to the expectations back in the day. You think of cancer and you think of radiation, chemotherapy, surgery, or some combination thereof. And the thing that always got me was that the doctors would hand out these flyers for support groups. And on the flyers, come once or twice a month, and we'll sit around and talk about our cancers. But for me, I was a 29-year-old looking around the cancer center, and everybody else was at least twice my age, if not more. They didn't have the same cares or worries that I did. They weren't worried about the infertility, career development, how to be mom to my stepdaughter, and all juggling at the same time. And so it didn't quite work for me. Well, about a year later, my husband and I went house hunting, and I kind of went downhill on that chemo roller coaster and cried for a second. So I had to send him out, and he grabbed some water from the car for me, and the realtor looked at me and said, "You okay?" I'm a colorectal cancer, I'm a cancer patient, and I'm on chemotherapy. And he said, "Well, what kind of cancer?" I said, "I'm colorectal." And he said, "Colorectal?" His eyes got big. And a few minutes later, my husband walks in. The two of us are going like this, comparing scars, and it turns out he was a young survivor as well. He gave me a gift that day because he made me feel normal. So all this is kind of old school, old chemo, right? Well, he told me about something new. He told me about the Colon Club and Colon Talk Forum, which is an anonymous online forum. So it's online, which means that I could get the care and support that I needed from my peers 24/7. And these are all people who were like me. They were young, and they were diagnosed, and people were telling them, people like you don't exist. You're an anomaly. So it's the first time I felt really kind of normal in my element. The other thing was that it was anonymous, so it allowed us to correspond with people with real deep intimacy in what we were discussing, that things that we couldn't talk about with our doctors or even our caregivers because they hadn't gone through it, so they don't really understand it in that same way. And that's part of why the patient coaches here are such an important element. They understand you. In the Colon Club, I started to learn. I started to research, and I started to follow articles. And honestly, at the beginning of my diagnosis, I don't know that I would have been in the headspace to be able to do that. It was such a wall of information, like you had said, that I sometimes felt like I was going in and things were coming in one ear and out the other, and I didn't know where I was coming or going. And so it was greatly diminished. So a lot of times in our support communities, we hear, stay off the internet when you're first diagnosed, because you don't know what you don't know. You go and you're going to look something up, and you never have a hangnail. You have toe cancer, I'm sorry. So, by the next recurrence, I had learned quite a bit more. I had a recurrence where my doctors had said, you failed the first 2 lines of chemo. There's one other option, it's just come on the market, FDA approved, and before he went further, I just went, stop, I'm sorry, no. If you're talking about regorafenib, it's not for me. It's for others, but it's not for me. I've seen the effects, and I've seen where it'll take me, and that's not where I want to go. You have to give me other options. So it was the power of technology that I was able to harness to find out what works for me. And that was a defining moment for me because it was the first time that I had ever said no to a doctor. And I was so convicted in my defiance that I think he was taken a little bit aback. I'm not sure whether it was because I said no to him or because I could actually say regorafenib, but either way, I think that technology is critically important to the advancements that are offered for us as patients, treatments, options. However, it is the self-advocacy that led me to figuring out what is right for me in my care. So the next option for me was surgery. And again, technology stepped up to bat. I was able to have a robotic-assisted laparoscopic surgery. So instead of having a full incision, I was able to have 2 very small cuts made. And they took out the tumor, and that small cut meant that I had faster healing, which meant that instead of 9 days in the hospital, I got it in 2. And if you know me in the hospital, I was out of there. I was checking myself out just about. So I've had about a dozen surgeries. I've had radiation, chemo, you name it, I've probably got it. You know, the first 10 years I was not an ostomy, but a recurrence. Changed that 2 years ago, so I'm now a permanent ostomy. And at one point in time, my radiation oncologist sat me down and said, you have an 8% chance statistically of living more than 3 years. So with technology and self-advocacy, I've bucked those odds. And one of the most important things that I have seen, and one of the most exciting things that I've seen after all of that, is the rise of genomics and immunotherapies. These combinations have given hope to finding the cure within our lifetime. And there's a lot of exciting things. Is technology the answer to better care? For me, absolutely yes. But there's always a but. I have rectal cancer. But it's a tool. It's a tool that needs the human guidance to deliver that care, that knowledge and that advocacy. It's a powerful combo when you can add them together. And as we move towards cures, we're going to see an improvement of care, an extension of a heightened quality of life. I have to say that I truly look forward to the near future when I will see more unicorns.